Tonight we're going to be in Psalms 130. As I was looking up different things about this psalm, it's another psalm that just got 8 verses. Martin Luther was once asked which were the best psalms, and here's what he replied. He replied that the Pauline Psalms were the best psalms. Now, when asked which psalms he meant, he answered Psalms 32, 51, Psalms 130, and 143. Now, if you're familiar with these psalms, you know why he answered the question, like he did. It's not that Paul wrote these psalms, but the subject matter and the things in it, like these, when it comes to sin, when it comes to forgiveness, when it comes to penitence, it's a lot of the things that Paul himself wrote about. It's like looking into Romans or looking into Ephesians as you read these. And Psalms 130 is part of that. And Psalms 130 is a psalm a lot about guilt, about sin, redemption, mercy, forgiveness, confidence in God. It's a wonderful psalm to read and to think about. And you think about this as this is part of the Psalms of Ascent as they would make their triannual trek to Jerusalem and singing this psalm. What a wonderful psalm to sing when you really think about the content that's in it. Now, one of the things that's good about all the psalms is that they really get to the heart of walking with God, I believe. I don't know whether it's for the good or for the bad sometimes, but in studying these psalms, it's really caused me to take a hard look at my own life and see all the flaws and things in my life, and to think about what our responsibility is, and then what our responsibility toward God is, and how we can communicate with God with the things that we need in our lives. But they're written from life experiences. At times the experience is praise, at other times the experience is heartache. There are times when the psalmist is close to God. There's time when the psalmist feels far away from God. I think as you read through the Psalms, I think each and every one of us can put ourselves in the place of the psalmist at one time or another. Of whatever's going in our lives, whether it's praise to God, whether it's heartache and pain and trial that we're going through, whether it's that we feel close to God, whether it's that we feel far away from God. I think there's a lot of teaching within the Psalms that could really help us, I think, if we would really pay attention. Now, this psalm, we find the psalmist is waiting for the Lord. He's facing his sin. He sees it in all of its ugliness. So he cries to the Lord and looks to Him for deliverance, and he meditates upon God, and he sees God's willingness to forgive. And that's a big theme in this psalm is, where would we be without God's forgiveness? What would we be able to accomplish? What would we be able to do? How could we redeem ourselves? And the answer, of course, is we can't without God. And we see that in this psalm. But as we read through, I want to read through the whole psalm, and we'll go through and talk about it. And again, it's only 8 verses, so we could not finish it. We could get done in 10 minutes. It just depends on how it may go. But I think there is a lot of information that we can get from this psalm. It starts out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplication. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. I wait for the Lord. My soul does wait, and in His word do I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than the watchman for the morning. Indeed, more than the watchman for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord there is loving kindness, and with Him is abundant redemption. When you see all the things that Israel says he will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. When you see this psalmist write, he starts out, it's almost like he's making an ascent, just like the Psalms do. you see him go from something personal and dealing with something personal to finally getting confidence and making it public and kind of helping in a public way to have the confidence in God that we should have. But let's look first here at just verses 1 and 2 in particular. It says, out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplication. So the psalmist finds himself deep in trouble, and he cries to the Lord for help. And I like how it really puts this. Of course, we've talked about this many times, that when you see Lord, all capitals, it's talking about Yahweh, the covenant God. When you see Lord, just a capital L, and the other, it's Adonai, where it's master. He's referring to both. He's referring to, you're my God, but you're also my master. You're my Lord. You're my, I'm your servant. And when he puts these things together, he's really showing his devotion, and I think his true loyalty for God, of how he looks at God. It's not just I believe in God. It's that he believes who God is and how he serves God himself. But when he cries out to God, the language I think is similar to Jonah. In Jonah chapter 2, you remember what Jonah cried out? He said, I cried out to the Lord because of my affliction, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. And then in verse 5, notice what Jonah said. The waters surrounded me, even to my soul. The deep closed around me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. So when you think about the psalmist, first of all, as he's crying out from the depths, and you think about Jonah and the predicament that he was in, where death wasn't a surety to him, that he thought there was no way around it, and crying out to God in that deep despair. Even the psalmist in Psalm 71 did the same thing. You remember? You who have shown me great and severe troubles shall revive me again and bring me up again from the depths of the earth. So when we look and see of crying out to God, many times I think we have to get ourselves in a situation sometime to truly understand it. And I think until we just think of the depths. Now, it doesn't tell what depths he's in. It doesn't tell if it's just an illustration or a metaphor for, I'm in deep trouble. I think the rest of the psalm describes it. I think he's talking about his sin. I think he feels like he's so deep in despair with sin, that he's so far down in the deep that he's crying out to God. God, I need you to be attentive to me. I need you to hear me. Go back to Psalms 1 and 2 if you don't mind, Ben. He says, out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplication. I think the psalmist is equating God hearing with God acting. And I think that's what we need to understand. If God's going to hear us, we just need him to hear us. If he could just hear our plea, that we know we're not too far gone, that he can't hear me, that I'm not too far in the depths. Because Satan, when we're just marred up, and I don't know any other way to say it, when you're just marred up in the depths of sin, and at some point, it's like the prodigal son. We're so far deep that we have to come to ourselves to realize, how did I get here? I realize that I'm here. And I think every Christian experienced this, because I think you have to experience this to become a Christian, don't we? We have to realize we're in sin and that we need God, and that's what draws us to him. We have to come to that point. But even as a child of his, we can sometimes feel like we're so far deep that maybe God can't hear us. Maybe we're too far gone. Maybe the choice that I made took me farther than I realized that it was going to take me. Isn't that what sin does? As it says, sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, cost you more than you want to pay. That's what Satan does, but he don't show you that at the beginning. You don't realize you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole. And then we're just like Jonah, or we're just like the psalmist. We're crying out from the depths, God, hear me. And we're praying that he will hear me. We're praying that he hears my cries and understand where I'm at. And I think in the midst of that, there's a hint here of, if it doesn't happen, then I've gone too far. But I think he goes in and he starts asking a rhetorical question about it. You know, okay, I'm in the deep. I've gone this far. This is happening to me. What am I going to do? The only thing left to do, cry out to God. I mean, we have, there's a lot that's in the world today as far as, are there any self-help books out there? And why do you think they sell? I mean, you can go to Walmart and see 100 of them. Anybody can write a self-help book, you know. Why do you think they sell so much?
Because people don't want to go to church. They don't want to do the self-help.
Well, people feel like they need help. But that's where they look for it. They want somebody just to tell them everything's going to be okay. And those things may help for a little while. They may take your mind off things. But it truly can't fix it, can it? Truly can't take it away. Truly can't wash it away. It truly can't get down to the heart of what it is. But yet we try and we try and we try and we try and we try. But at some point, I was watching something the other day. Something come up on YouTube, and someone said they were in a predicament they were in. They said, "Well, I guess rock bottom does have a basement, because I'm in it." And I thought, boy, you've got to be in some pretty bad stuff for you to feel like you're in the basement of rock bottom. But I think sometimes we have to get to that, or sometimes we find ourselves in that, and that's when Satan tries to tell us, you've gone too far. God can't hear you. God's not going to do anything. You know, you can do this yourself. Because what happens is, before we get too far, we think we can climb out ourselves. We think we can do it ourselves. We think we can fix it. Or we could read a book that's going to fix it instead of going to the book. But that's what Satan wants us to do. But here the psalmist is crying out of the depths I cried to the Lord. Oh Lord, Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplication. Now look at verses 3 through 4. If you can pull it up for me, Ben. We're going to have to cut us some slack. We were looking at the wreck over there. I was doing different things. I didn't get all my verses in, so Ben's going to get a workout tonight. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. Now notice how he starts out. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? So he's crying out to the depths. He's realizing where he is. And he says, if you should mark iniquities, who can stand? Think about that statement. Think about if God is following you around all day long with a notebook. Every thought that you have, every action that you have, everything that you do, he's right there just writing it down. And just keeps writing it down. If he took an account for iniquities like that, marked iniquities like that, and there was nothing else that could happen, who could stand? Is there anybody that could?
I'd still be in bed.
Is there anybody who could finish at the end of the day and say, I bet you ain't got nothing on that notebook? I tell you, before it's lunchtime, he's going to be having to give another notebook. I mean, the best we can do, we could go through verses, and I won't make you pull them all up, but we could go through Romans. We could go and see where, the wages of sin of death. We could go through and see there's none righteous, no, not one. We can go through all of these. We can look at some of the greatest Bible characters throughout Scripture that would have things in that notebook. There's only one that wouldn't, and he's the one that came to take care of the notebook, didn't he? So he's asking a rhetorical question. He says, if you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? Who could do it? Now, think about this for a minute. This should just cause us to ponder. If it wasn't for God, and that's what he goes on and says, look at verse 4. But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. Think about the first. If it just stopped on the first, would there be any hope? There'd be no hope. We couldn't do it. But there is forgiveness with you. And because there's forgiveness with you, I can cry out to you from the deep. I could be in the depths. I could be in despair. I could hear Satan in this ear saying, you've gone too far down. You're in the basement of rock bottom. He can't hear you. But he says, if that's where it is, then I am without hope. If that's all that there is, if you mark iniquities like that, no one could stand. Everyone would be in the basement. No one would be standing. Where would this world be? That's what Jesus told them in John chapter 3, wasn't it? He said, I didn't come to condemn the world, but He came to what? Save it. He said, I come to bring the light because the world's in darkness. The world's condemned already. We're in the basement already. He come to get us out of it. And sometimes I think, and I'm talking personally too, is we don't live a life in gratitude of that fact alone. I mean, we can get caught up in doctrine. We can get caught up in all the things that we do, all the things that we argue in church, all the things that we're involved. We can get in all that. But it comes down to that point. Do we really appreciate and acknowledge where we were and what He did to bring us from it? That alone should cause us to what? That you may be feared. That alone should be enough for us to say, I don't want to disappoint Him. It's a fear of disappointment. Have you ever seen that in somebody? It's not that they are afraid of you or afraid they're going to get punished. They're afraid that you're going to be disappointed. What you think is a better motivator? When it comes to, I can think of people in my life that, it would just break my heart to disappoint them. And I've known some that would be, my children included, one of them especially, it was more about, I don't want to disappoint. When you think about it, I wasn't like that. I was more, growing up, I was more, it's worth a whooping, I'll do it. That was my philosophy, I guess. But I never did think of it on the disappointing part. But the disappointing is, and that's what he's saying here, I think. But there is forgiveness with you that you may be feared. So while I'm getting Satan whispering in this ear and saying, this is where you're at, this is what you've done, that's the thing I don't understand. And it took me a little while to understand it as a minister. In talking with people, I spent a lot of time in talking to them about their decisions, about how they got where they're at, all these types of things, which, I guess in essence should be discussed at some time. But you know what it really come down to? It really didn't matter how they got to that place. What mattered was that's where they were. And where they were is where they're starting from. And how did they get from that place into the body of Christ? All that other stuff really didn't matter, did it? They're here. Did it matter how they got there? Did it matter? I mean, we worry about so many things that we don't worry about the true problem of things. I can remember being in a congregation one morning. I always went and I always got there, unlocked the door, turned the lights on, and did different things. And there was one family that actually got upset with me because I did that, because they like to come in and unlock the doors and be there. But I just got there early, a lot of times, because it's the quiet time. Nobody called on Sunday morning at 6:30 usually, until time to go to church. So that's just where I would be. And I can remember a lady came in and wanted to talk. Oh, she was devastated. And what she'd actually said was, I come through here about 2 o'clock this morning and seen your sign. And on the sign I'd put, where else can you go for help? That's what I put on the sign. What better? I think it was, what better place to go for help. And she said, I had nowhere else to go. So she said, I just waited until I seen somebody here. And so I started talking to her, and I first started, talking about, well, let's talk about how you got here. And then I decided, I'm not going to do that. You're here. How can we help? What do you need most right now? One, her and her daughter was living out of the car. They were, she was in some pretty dire straits. So I was trying to figure out how to help here. And about that time, it was about 20, 30 minutes, a couple walks in, and About the time they got to the foyer, and I was sitting on the back of the pew on one side, and the lady was sitting about two rows in front of me, and I was up on the back of the pew facing her. Before they ever come in, all you could hear in the church building was, "Who's in my parking place?" That's the first thing out. So while I'm over here dealing with that, she gets up, walks out, gets the cars, and leaves. I have no idea where she went. I have no idea what happened after that. I tell you, I was devastated. Now, granted, I changed my sermon that day. That's what I preached on. Just from the hip was preaching on that. But it made me think that that's what we do, isn't it? Sometimes we go to the negative. We go to who's in my parking place, or we go, well, you should have known better. You shouldn't have been in this situation anyway. Or look, it's your own choices that got you here. It's all, and all that's true. But in the end, does it matter? In the end, all that matters is where you're at now. And if we say we can help, because God says He can help, when we cry out from the depths, that's what we need to be showing the world. We can help. We're here to help. He helped us. He can help you. And Jesus said, I didn't come to condemn. I come to save. I come to teach. I come to bring the light. I'm the way. And if we don't show that out of the depths, what are we really doing? It really comes down to that, I think. And I think that's what this psalmist is really getting to when he says, I'm in the depths. How can I get out? I couldn't get out if it wasn't for your forgiveness. Now let me ask you this. Did God have to do it? He didn't have to. He wanted to. He provided that for us before He ever created us, didn't He? He provided that way and that plan for us. And so you think about all the teaching that Jesus did. You think about Paul. I was thinking about what Martin Luther said. You think about the writings of Paul. How many times he looked back on his life and say, I was the chief of sinners. This is where I was, and this is what he did for me. You think about being in the depths. I was in the depths. I was the chief of the sinners, so I was way down deep. But yet while he was deep in prison, what was he doing? He was singing praises to God, because he knew the difference. He knew what God had done. He knew that now he's physically down in the depths, and he can cry out to God, and God's going to hear it. And that's why do you think the Philippian jailer obeyed the gospel? What if Paul had just been down in the depths and, well, I'm down here, it's my own fault. It would have been different, wouldn't it? Paul had to go through this. Paul was there, but it was for somebody else's benefit. That's what we don't think about. It's what can I show those that are around me? This psalmist is having a personal struggle right now, I believe, and he's bringing himself out of it through God's help so he can bring this to others, as we see at the end of the psalm. But maybe it would do us well to, I know it wouldn't me, to say, okay, this is where I was, and this is where He brought me to. And sometimes I get myself back down in there, but I can still crawl out to Him and call out to Him, because why? But there is forgiveness with you. I tell you, forgiveness is a hard word, because forgiveness is you got to forgive yourself. Forgiveness is you got to forgive others. Forgiveness is is because there's guilt that comes along with that. And I think that's what's here with the psalmist. There's guilt. He's down in the depths. There's guilt with that. At some point you got to let that go, because you realize God did. He's not sitting there with a notebook anymore. He's not just keeping score. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Walk in the light as He's in light. We have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus Christ does what? Cleanseth us, continues to cleanse us as long as we walk in the light. I don't care what Satan tries to tell us, and I think that's what this psalmist is really showing us. Any thoughts on this before we move on?
I think most of us are still unaware of just how much God forgives us every single day. Because we think usually we have a list of 4 big sins, all the ones that we have no issue with. And we think, well, I don't think that those are, well, I committed one maybe in June of last year, but God forgives us every single day.
Yeah.
Every day. And I've thought about it, like, when I was young, there's sins, and I'm not saying like a child. Like I said, when I was
Yeah.
there's sins I committed that were my fault, but the root of that was that I was young and foolish. And there's sins that I commit now because I'm in that adult age and I'm busy and I don't give time. I'm sure when I get older, there's sins I'm going to commit because I don't have the energy to put forth to do what I ought to do all the time. And so at every stage of life, God has forgiven us more than we'll ever know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look in Psalms 143 and verse 2, Ben, if you don't mind. I thought I put a few verses on here. It says, do not enter in judgment with your servant, for in your sight no one living is righteous. I mean, think about that. No one living is righteous. Isaiah 53 and verse 6. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So you think about what we are, and when I think in terms of the sheep, I always think of the sheep that we had, and I'm thinking, if that's what we're like, every day God has to get me out of a fence. He has to get me because I've just wandered into something else. He has to get me because I'm always somewhere that I've got myself in trouble. Because I don't pay attention, I don't look, I don't realize, I just go. As Ty said, sometimes we get busy and then there we are. Before you know it, we're wrapped up in I can remember we had our sheep 2 days, and I had a movable woven electric fence that I had for the goats earlier, and I had it turned off because I got used to it. So when I got sheep, I didn't think about it. Went out there the next morning, and one of these things was just wrapped up in it. Just looked like it said, I believe I'm just going to wrap up in a blanket. I mean, it looked like a Tootsie Roll out there. And choked itself to death. And I'm thinking, how do you even do that? I don't even know how you do it. So I roll it up, and I get it completely rolled up, and I put it in the barn. I go out there the next morning, there's one stuck its head in where I had it rolled up and was choking. And I'm like, do y'all have a meeting in the morning? Who's going to die today? I mean, if anybody ever dug up our backyard, I hope they know animal bones from humans, or I'm in trouble because there's a lot of them out there, goats and sheep and everything. But I'm thinking, and then the more I read Scripture about being sheep, I'm like, if we're like that, what would we do without a shepherd? I mean, to protect us, to keep us from harm like that, to feed us like we need to. It's constant attention, because we can't do it ourselves, So what do? We cry out to Him. We realize there's none righteous, no, not one. I can't be self-righteous and think, as Jesus turned to some of them, well, if you're sick, you don't need a physician. I'm going to go to the ones who recognized you're sick, because I can't do you no good if you think you don't need me. I'm going to the ones who need me. That's why look at the ones that He called to Him. Look at the ones that He went to teach. It's the ones that the self-righteous wouldn't have anything to do with, because they were sitting back and saying, well, you shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have done this. And Jesus said, I'm going to take you where you are, as long as you realize where you are is lost, and I'm going to bring you here. That's what He does. That's what He continues to do. That's what He wants us to do through His Word. We're His mouthpiece now. We're His legs and His arms to go out and do that. But we have to recognize it within ourselves. Where do we get to? 3, 4. Where are we at? 5, 6? It says, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His Word I do hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than those who watch for the morning. Yes, more than those who watch for the morning. Look at the first part. This is what Ty had in his lesson Sunday night. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in His Word I do hope. That's what we do. We wait. We wait. I'm in the depths. I'm waiting. I'm anticipating, just like it says here, those who watch for the morning. It's more than those. You take the watchmen that watch for the sunrise. They were confident. They knew the sunrise was coming. They were just waiting on it. When is it going to come? They were anticipating. They're waiting for it to crest over and to see that. He says, that's what I'm doing. I'm waiting for the Lord, and I'm hoping in your word I do hope. So he says, my hope, my surety is in your word. And your word is, here's what you would do. So here it shows that the psalmist had confidence on previous things of what the Lord could do. So the psalmist knew that the Lord was about forgiveness, was about mercy and redemption. So he says, that's why I'm crying out to Him and I'm waiting. And I think that's sometimes our problem is we don't wait. I don't know about you, I'm not a good waiter. I don't like to wait in line. I don't like to wait at a red light. I don't like to wait for the microwave for 30 seconds. We don't like to wait anymore. We want everything right now. Sometimes we just need to wait and see what the Lord is going to do. But many times that's not what we do. But it says, yes, more than those who watch for the morning. More than those who watch for the morning. We're anticipating, and ultimately we're waiting for that ultimate morning, aren't we? But we realize we're in the dark, and we're trusting in your word. We're hoping in your word more than those who are looking for the morning, he says. Let's move on, Ben. It says, O Israel. Now he goes from something personal to having that confidence to be able to, I guess, go more in community, more in public. He says, O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is mercy, and with Him is abundant redemption, and He shall redeem Israel from all his iniquities. Now think about what the psalmist is saying. You hope in the Lord. Why? For with the Lord there is mercy. With Him is abundant redemption. Now notice, it's not having your hope in mercy. It's not having your hope in redemption. It's not having your hope in forgiveness. It's not having your hope in these things. It's having your hope in the one who brings these things. Now there's a difference in that, isn't there? I look beyond the gift and I look to the gift giver. I look beyond what I'm getting and I look to and have hope in the one that can provide it. That's where it really makes a difference. It's not just about what I'm getting out of it. It's about the one that's giving it. And when I start hoping and trusting and following in that, then that's when these other things come. It's trusting in the right things. And it says, He shall redeem Israel from all his iniquities. And isn't that true? Isn't that what Jesus said when He looked over Jerusalem? In Matthew 23 at the end of the chapter, oh Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if you just would, what did He say He would do? I'd gather you like a hen gathers her chicks. But you wouldn't. You know, the psalmist is even telling them, if you would just do this, here's what the Lord would do. Jesus is saying, I'm here. If you would just do this, that's what He was telling them. If you would just do this, if you would just come to me, here's what I would do. But they wouldn't. How many today, the same thing? Jesus is still saying, if you would just come, He can forgive all your iniquities. You think you're in the depths, you think there's no hope, you think it's despair. Again, like the prodigal son, we need to come to ourselves and realize there's something better than here in this mud with the hogs. There's something better than this. There's someone better that can bring something better than this. It's not just about the one who can get me out of it. Notice what the prodigal son said. The prodigal son, in my Father's house, here's what there is. It's not about what there is, it's his Father's house and what his Father can provide. And that's what we need to look for, and that's what he's saying here. I cried out from the depths. I realized no one could stand if it wasn't for the forgiveness and the redemption that He brings. So me knowing that, me experiencing that, me being provided with that, then that's what I can tell the world now. I can tell the world, look, this is where I was. This is where I am now because this is what God has done. He can do the same for you if you would do the same thing. But we've got to truly believe it ourselves to be able to tell others. We've got to truly believe it ourselves, follow it ourselves, and realize we're not perfect. There's none righteous, no, not one. And we still need His redemption. We still need His forgiveness. We still need His mercy every single day and live in gratitude to that. And I think that's what the psalmist is talking about. Any final thoughts about this psalm?
Something you brought up personalize that from God and who He is. You know, it becomes more about, again, what He can give us.
Right.
And, that's something that I have to work on.
Right.
Really hard. Like I said, they preached that, and I felt this call because He got me, because it wasn't on my list either.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Any other final thoughts?